Another topic in macroeconomics is how do I achieve growth in my standard of living? And there are two things that move your real GDP forward and increase it. And when real GDP increases, we're talking about true growth. It's not higher prices driving what appears to be a higher GDP. It's actually more technology, more productivity, more workers. Okay, so what makes GDP grow, real GDP grow, is basically two categories of things. We either get more people to come into the workforce and produce, so more workers means more things that can be made. And the second thing, and the most important thing, is a productivity improvement. We need to learn how to make things with less effort. If we do that, then everyone gets more from the efforts that we're putting in as a country. Okay, so that's why productivity is so important. And as I said earlier, it is the key determinant of living standards. Growth in productivity is the key determinant of growth in living standards. All right. So, what determines productivity? It's the physical capital per worker. Okay. If we dug ditches with shovels like we used to back in ancient times, we would have to tie up a lot of people to build a road. But if we invest in capital equipment like bulldozers and backhoes, things of that nature, we can produce an improvement in roads and do it with less workers. And that makes us more productive, and that is what's going to give us a higher standard of living. The other thing is human capital per worker. Human capital is what do the people in the workforce know? Are they intelligent? Do they have high school degrees? Do they have more than high school degrees? So the intelligence and the knowledge of the workers in the workforce extremely important, and that's called human capital. And then what about the natural resources per worker? In a country that's kind of phenomenal story is Japan has very low natural resources, and yet they're one of the most productive economies in the world. And they do it all with the human capital of their people who are hard workers and very, very smart, and they are able to have a high standard of living, even though they have lower than normal natural resources. And then there's just technical know-how. Do we have a technology base in our country? And if we do, that helps us create the productivity improvements we need to make to have everybody see a higher standard of living. So natural resources can be a limit to growth. It causes us to have to figure out ways around shortages. Okay, and we do that in the United States pretty well. We come up with ways of dealing with a lack of resources, come up with other ways of getting around it. There's also what's called a diminishing returns. If we have a high savings rate in our country, then we have more resources that would be available to buy capital equipment, okay? Because the higher we save money, the more that money then is borrowed by firms to buy equipment and things to make themselves more productive, okay? If we have a low savings rate, then we buy more goods in the market, but we're starving firms from having the resources they need to buy capital stock, okay? Bulldozers and the like. All right, so another thing that happens is if you're a country that has a high, strong amount of capital in the country, then having a little bit more capital puts you out in here somewhere. You don't get a whole big increase in productivity when you are already starting from a high capitalization. But countries that are low in capitalization, countries like Uganda, some of the ones we saw in earlier discussions that have a very low standard of living, if you can infuse some capital into their operations, then they can see large increases in standard of living improvement. So We also have investment from abroad. If we have investment from abroad, there are some benefits. We do see some flow back to the foreign capital owners. So the money that comes from a foreign country, the profits are going to go back to that foreign country. But we get the increase in the stock, the capital stock of the country. In other words, the foreign country sends money over to a subsidiary, and that subsidiary buys equipment. We get the benefit in this country of the equipment and what it does for productivity, but the profits from that company go back to the other countries. So we still gain, but not as much as if we did it internally. We get to higher productivity, we get higher wages, and we have state-of-the-art technology. So even though some of what capital investment is in it comes into this country is coming from abroad, we still benefit from it. And then the World Bank. Now, we're in a Christian community at IWU, and we know that we are expected to look out for the poor. Well, how do you look out for the poor? Let's take that country of Uganda that I picked earlier. A very poor state of affairs there, and we should and could send money to them to try to help them. They are starving in some cases. They have very low standards of living. But what can we do to make them, as they say, teach a man to fish? We can go to the World Bank. They try to get capital flowing into poor countries. That's what they're established for. And they're trying to get funds from the world's advanced countries, make loans to the less developed countries so that we could try to increase their capital in their country. All right. Other things to talk about are what they call the virtuous circle. That's policies that lead to more rapid economic growth would naturally improve health outcomes and which in turn would further promote economic growth. That's what you want to do in a country that's poor. That's the way we can help them. Just sending them money really doesn't teach them to fish, as they say. They need to see us help them improve the capital stock in their country so that they have machinery and things so that they can make an improvement in their standard of living. So a couple things, other things that a country needs is they have to have property rights. We have a very strong court system. We have the right to own property here, and we protect that right. And in other countries, it's not that way. It's a person can't own property. Somebody else owns the property. They don't have control over it. And if you don't have that, it stifles growth. Okay, if you don't have property rights, as it says here, you have a major problem. You have contracts that are hard to enforce, and you have fraud that goes unpunished, and you have corruption. You have people that are being paid off in order for you to buy some land. Okay, and the political instability is another thing. We have to have a country that has political stability. If there is a revolution going on, foreign investors are not going to want to come in and invest in that country, and that hurts them, as we talked earlier about how foreign capital comes into a country and it is helpful and beneficial to that country. Okay, so these are some of the things that we could try to do to improve the standard of living in the really poor countries in the world. Some countries have inward-oriented policies. They avoid interaction with the rest of the world. They put tariffs on things. They try to protect their industries, and it has an adverse effect on their economic growth. One thing you can be sure to get out of this economics course is that economists are for free trade, free-flowing trade. When you try to put tariffs on things, you hurt your economic growth. Some economists study the effects of population in a country. A larger population does have more workers to produce goods and service. That's good. And they have more consumers. That's also good. But it also stretches natural resources. So a large population is good if you can keep everybody working and you don't starve out your natural resources or dilute your capital stock. The more population growth you have, the less your capital dollars are per person, and that means a lower productivity of the workers and a lower GDP. So there are economists who do study population growth and do try to create incentives for countries to try to control their population growth so that they can not dilute their capital and try to move the standard of living up. When the standard of living improves, of course, population growth can be sustained. All right. So that's kind of what this chapter is about. It's how you go about helping a country that is very, very poor. What do you have to do to establish in that country to get them to improve their standard of living? And that's some of the things that we participate in as a country in the United States. We participate to support the World Bank, and we do have foreign aid to countries and send experts sometimes over to help them establish a better economy. Okay, if you have any questions on this one, please let me know.